The real truth about sexual misconduct and why it occurs. In this writing, without judgment, I just wanted to touch on various issues that might be causing sexual misconduct to occur in our society. I'm hoping to connect the dots to a situation which seems to be turning our society upside down. There is absolutely and unequivocally no excuses and no defense for sexual harassment, rape, and molestation of another human being. All of these things are atrocious violations of human rights, which could never make sense and should never be tolerated in our current day society. This writing is not an attempt at excusing this action, but an attempt at exploring the deeper meaning as to why this action is so prevalent in society. That's what this writing is about. Before you overlook or dismiss this writing as total nonsense, I'd like to preface it by saying this. Everything in the universe was created for a basic reason, and that reason is for the universe to survive and prosper. Universal mind has instilled within every living being a strong innate drive to spread life and procreate. This is a powerful drive that is equal to, or even stronger than the need for food and water. The sex drive within humans is as powerful as an atomic bomb. Of course, this drive, if misdirected or taken out of context, can be 10 times more destructive than any bomb ever created. The instincts to survive is one of the strongest instincts known to man. Sexuality is another instinct which is as equally strong. Some might disagree, and say, "Stop right there, not so fast, you can't compare these two subject matters, because there is absolutely no connection." I realize, if we don't eat, we know we will eventually die. Now, I'm not saying if we don't have sex we would die, but on a larger scale, if we didn't procreate, the human race would eventually die out. This writing has a lot to do with that concept. I've self-published several audio books, suggesting that everything in existence is connected on a spiritual level. Everything. This writing will follow that train of thought throughout the book. Through my writings, I always attempt to examine life from a spiritual aspect, revealing how we as humans have a tendency to take many things out of spiritual context. Things like race relations, karma, religion, money, marriage, and of course sexuality. Anything that's misunderstood will always be misdirected and perceived in a negative light. At this point, I'm deliberately inserting a redundancy warning clause, because I will be repeating the following phrase as many times as possible throughout this writing. In spite of any misunderstanding we have about sexuality, there is absolutely no place for sexual misconduct or abuse in our society, even if we don't understand its true purpose. If we viewed most situations in life from a spiritual perspective, we still may not agree with, or like the explanation, but we at least will give ourselves a chance at getting closer to why we as humans act and react the way we do in certain situations. I'd like to preface this next segment by stating, on the ladder of spiritual development, human beings are infants, stuck on the bottom rung. Spiritually speaking, we are equal to an infant working its way up the ladder of maturity in life. A human child may not reach full maturity until far into its 30s and 40s. In comparison to that analogy, from a spiritual view, humans are still at the infant stage of spiritual development. There are certain spiritual concepts we are not yet capable of grasping at this point in time. What this means is that the spiritual laws that are available, waiting for us to utilize them, appear to be failing us, because we aren't adhering to their principles. Down through the ages, many spiritually advanced beings have spoken, written, and dictated many of these laws in an attempt to enhance human development. This might be a part of the reason we are experiencing so many struggles on this planet. We have shifted so far from spiritual principles that it has become a serious battle, just trying to understand these struggles. We are slowly beginning to awaken, and some of the things that are coming to the forefront as a result of waking up, are starting to scare and disturb many of us. When it comes to spirituality, most of us are in deep denial, and not willing to make the changes necessary, to enhance the inevitable spiritual shift, which is about to take place on the planet. Individuals are feeling a need to lash out physically and emotionally, because vivid glimpses of the real world are being revealed, disrupting and contradicting many lifelong belief systems. When it comes to universal and spiritual concepts, there are some scenarios which are very difficult to translate into physical context without sounding absurd or controversial. This writing is about a subject matter, which fits into that category. Humans are slowly starting to remember what it was like in the spirit realm, when we resided there, and we shared energy freely amongst each other without guilt, limits, or judgment. In the physical realm we have formed reasons to create barriers. Spirit beings are who we truly are. As spirit beings, we literally have no barriers, but we are still having a hard time accepting that idea as real. Until we come to grips with that concept, our true divine potential will never be reached. For centuries, many religions and religious organizations have tried to nullify and suppress many things in nature. Sexuality is definitely one of those things. Some have tried to control it by promoting abstinence. Unfortunately, a lot of our problems in society has to do with simply trying to stifle or curb this powerful energy. This is the power that creates and guarantees the proliferation of life as we know it. How is it possible to restrain a power this strong? We should never try to stifle such a force. When we try to suppress or curb certain things in society, only negative results will ensue. As an example, we can all attest to some of the problems we are experiencing with food and dieting. There are thousands of pills and programs aimed at controlling weight, by curbing our appetites. Yet we are the heaviest we have ever been in history, and it seems we're losing the fight. Keep in mind, in the spirit realm there is no race, no age difference, color, or gender. Through our slow spiritual awakening, we are finally starting to remember what it was like to experience things instantly without limits. In my writing, All Things Connected, I chose 3 specific topics to illustrate this point. I chose guns, flying, and the internet. Each of these topics represent actions we experienced while in the spirit realm. The book demonstrates that we are trying to emulate these spiritual actions while in the physical realm, by creating physical things to copy them. I didn't highlight sexuality as one of the subject matters in that particular book, but I did include a short segment specifically dealing with how we as young souls, in the beginning of human creation, transferred our energy into the physical realm and created a means of sharing this energy with one another. I explain in detail how soul energy was effortlessly shared while in the spirit realm, through a process called merging. When the act of merging occurred, it was always through mutual consent. This process was not called sex. It was merely viewed as 2 souls, merging their energies together as one, to share and experience an amazing feeling of pleasurable bliss and fulfillment. Only after entering the physical world and adapting to physical bodies did the merging process become known as sexuality. However, in the physical realm, down through the ages, we have altered many things which has stifled and limited this process, which makes it difficult to freely share this energy the way in which it was shared in the spirit realm. When dealing with the power of this nature, we have to be cautious. Some individuals tapped into this concept in the 60s and 70s, labeling it as free love. The idea was to remove limits from sexuality and to share it freely, but that concept went astray quickly, due to selfish and non-responsible reckless abuse. This only caused confusion and STDs to spread on a wide-scale basis. Some of the things putting limitations on sexuality were initially created as guidelines and safeguards to prevent negative things of that nature from occurring. Things such as age, race, color, and gender are a few of the guidelines I'm referring to. They were never meant to be viewed as limitations. Sadly, they have clearly become limitations, which have become very personal, based on strong long-term religious belief systems. In our current-day society, as an example, in the minds of many individuals, when dealing with same-sex relations, it is considered wrong, and sometimes immoral for the same gender to have sexual relations. The label we've chosen for that act is homosexuality. We've meticulously written specific and strict laws against adults having intimate contact with minors. That label is called pedophilia. When it comes to dealing with race relations, some individuals are vehemently against different races having sexual contact with each other. Some label this as interracial, or race mixing. Now keep in mind, in the spirit realm, none of these labels ever existed. As mentioned earlier, when we left the spirit realm and entered the physical world, guidelines were created mainly to fit into the physical realm's format. Down through the ages, and through our human filter, many of these guidelines have been used in an attempt to establish moral standards based on personal and limited perceptions. I explain in detail, in All Things Connected, why and how it was necessary to take on various roles to fit into the physical format, in order to successfully experience many of the things that once occurred effortlessly in the spirit realm. Some of us chose the male role, while others chose the role of female, which translates into opposite genders. Some chose different skin colors, which translates into different races. Eventually, everyone ultimately experienced the role of offsprings, which is the process used for souls to enter and re-enter this physical reality. This constitutes playing the temporary role of a child or a minor, until reaching adulthood. None of these roles were supposed to change or stifle this powerful, beautifully blissful energy, which inevitably becomes known as sexuality on the physical plane. In the beginning, it was clearly understood, all of these roles weren't supposed to last. This was only a way of making things work in a temporary physical world. We all interacted and joyfully played along with one another in this illusionary world. After a prolonged period of time, something happened, causing a change to occur. Eventually the role-playing became more than just role-playing. It evolved into a very real, and mostly enjoyable experience. Some of us chose to remain in this physical realm, eventually ignoring or rejecting the spirit realm, becoming entranced in the physical illusion, ultimately accepting it as the real world. This is the segment of the book where I hope to bring the pieces together, explaining why I truly believe sexual misconduct is appearing so rampantly in our society. This is the reality of where we are now. We are living in a world filled with rules and limitations. We're those young souls, from the beginning of time, long ago, who were never confined to limitations. We are also beginning to remember some of the things that were very natural occurrences in the spirit realm. In metaphysical terms, the act of remembering is what constitutes a spiritual awakening. We are at a critical time in that spiritual awakening phase. We are beginning to remember gradually what it was like to share our energies naturally and non-selfishly. The problem we are currently facing is this. Because of all the laws we've created, this beautiful naturally flowing energy has become dark, evil, mysterious, nasty, and scary to many of us. Some of us know what happens when a powerful energy is contained or restricted. It will inevitably find its way out of restriction. Sexual energy was created by universal mind, to express itself freely. Trying to contain it, goes against the moral fabric of life and creation. The following statement, I believe, is the crux of what's happening with sexual misconduct in our present society. As a result of being stifled, it has found a means of expressing itself, and that expression is manifesting as sexual aggression. I could end this writing right here with that particular point and feel as though I've efficiently gotten my point across, but there are so many elements contributing to this dilemma, that I feel compelled to go on. Many people have no idea that sexuality is a natural free-flowing energy which must be respected, and understood. Once something is understood, it can be dealt with in a manner in which it can be controlled. Because of the stigmas which have been bestowed upon it, some feel it has to be hidden, or it should take place in the dark, behind closed doors, undercover, or forced aggressively upon another being who is in a helpless position. This subject has to be dealt with honestly and openly because it is such a powerful but important emotion for human existence. Because of the negative attachments, it's been turned into something which it is not. This has to be viewed from a spiritual perspective, or we will never get what is truly going on. We are at a critical stage. This energy has been bottled up for so long, that it has found other ways of expressing itself. Those ways are not very flattering to a society trying so hard to stay true to religious and moral values. I'm not professing to have the solution to sexual misconduct, but I think if we stop the judgment, the ridicule, and the ignorance, we might be able to make some sense of what's happening. Only then can we begin the healing process, by helping each other to overcome the extreme guilt and mystery that is associated with this subject. Again, we should never make excuses or accept sexual misconduct as just another occurrence. If the perpetrator and the victim could be made aware that there is something much deeper than he or she is experiencing, we all might come to grips with this dilemma and learn to forgive each other. Sexuality was designed to represent something totally different from the way it is perceived in this reality. Sexual misconduct is now suddenly being thrusted into the spotlight, but it has been in existence for a very long time. We are just now learning how widespread it is because of our access to the internet and endless media coverage. I believe the things which are coming to the forefront has presented the perfect opportunity for us to examine some of the stigmas that are created from fear and ignorance about this subject. Sexuality consists of many stigmas, causing blurred lines and mixed messages. We have seen and heard, on a consistent basis, how common it is for males to sexually expose themselves to females. Is this sexy, or perverted? On the other hand, females have also been known to occasionally expose themselves to males as well. This action could be viewed as a mixed message. Let's talk about that briefly. I've heard so many people ask, why would a guy think that sending a picture of his privates to a female is sexy? There is such a thin line between being sexy and appearing perverted, or maybe it's all in the perception. If a woman sends a guy a picture of her privates, the guy is probably flattered beyond words because it might seem sexy to him. This might remain in his mind as a highlight, so in turn he feels perhaps it's okay to send a photo of his privates to females, believing it will affect them in the same manner in which he was affected after receiving a female's photo. Oh, by the way, you heard me correctly. There are some women that choose to send pictures to men. My point is that we can't blame males solely for things of this nature, and we must stop taking for granted that females sometimes engage in this type of behavior. I must clarify one thing though. If a female does this, she does it more discreetly and is more likely to target a male she is attracted to. It's a common belief, since the beginning of time, that males have always been the aggressor when it comes to sexual relations, but I think we know, women can be very aggressive once they set sight on their object of desire. I'll talk a bit more about that later. Keep in mind, both males and females are highly influenced by sexual energy. It's a natural occurrence for females wanting to be attractive to males. As a result, they might do certain things to enhance their appearance through makeup, clothing, and physical demeanor. And ultimately, when most males see a female that is extremely attractive, the following is not true in every case, but the first thought entering his mind is usually sexually related. I realize some of you might not agree with that previous statement, but nature designed it to work that way. Still, none of this is an excuse for sexual abuse or harassment. That is what I mean when I say most natural instincts created by nature are taken out of context. Some males perceive a woman's attractiveness as an automatic invitation to act. Females want to be attractive, but their intentions aren't to attract every male in the room, because by nature they aren't wired that way. Females tend to be more picky and selective. As an example, I've heard some females say that one compliment from a male she is attracted to is received much more graciously than several compliments from 10 guys she is not so attracted to. The only point here is that some males automatically assumes, when he perceives a woman as sexy, she's attracted to him, to the same degree. I realize most of this fits into the natural scheme of attraction, but none of this justifies sexual aggression or sexual misconduct. Ultimately, as a result of a male's outward actions, males are automatically pegged as the aggressor. In rebuttal to the previous statement, as I briefly touched on earlier, Some females do approach guys in a sexually aggressive manner, and I believe it is happening more often than is being reported. It's not reported very often because most males don't usually complain when a female makes a sexual advance towards him. He might disclose it to his friends in a bragging fashion, and I'm not even sure if he considers it as a misconduct, of course, unless it's done in a stalking manner disrupting his personal space. Many years ago, it seems victims were afraid to come forth after being affected by these events, and if they came forth they feared being blamed or ridiculed. However, for some reason, more and more victims are coming forth, pointing out the perpetrators. Some people asks, if the perpetrators are aware that this action affects people so negatively, why don't they show more self-constraint when it comes to committing this act? I feel part of the reason is because we are dealing with a very powerful instinct. Unfortunately, in our present-day society, it seems we are dealing with a disconnect between instincts and intellect. Here is what I mean by that statement. Instincts is something that every living creature has been endowed with. However, humans are at the top of the pecking order because we are instilled with both instincts and intellect. Intellect gives humans the ability to know when to act, or not to act on a particular instinct. As an example, animals in the wild operate on pure instincts. They eat when they are hungry, they rest when they are tired, they kill or attack when they feel threatened. They mate whenever or wherever they are, seemingly without guilt or conscience. Humans possess those exact instincts as well, but again we have our intellect to keep things in check. Here's an interesting point. The difference between animals in the wild and our domesticated animals is that we usually control their behavior and activities. However, the instincts still remain. We feed them once or twice a day, walk them 2 or 3 times a day, allowing them to adapt to our schedules and routines. We don't get to witness their raw instincts as we might in the wilds, because they are trained to fit into a society of laws and rules to maintain order. If left to their own devices they would react quite the contrary. My point is that we too are capable of curbing our instincts through intellect and reasoning. It's called self-control over instincts. In the spirit world, human souls have always been free, somewhat like the animal's nature when they are in their natural habitat in the wild, where certain restrictions don't apply. As young souls in the beginning of time, we entered and adapted to this physical realm, eventually becoming domesticated to physical rules and restrictions, pretty much the way our pets adhere to certain rules, under human jurisdiction. However, on a higher level, humans are required and expected to abide by certain spiritual and physical rules, or else we will not fit into this physical format. Let me see if I can clarify this point by making it a bit clearer. Here is a simple analogy in an attempt to describe the true nature of human instincts in comparison to raw animal instincts. After our pets are housebroken and trained to do, or not to do certain things, they might occasionally have an accident on the carpet. For that brief moment, natural instincts may have overridden the logical aspect of the situation. We can usually tell by our pet's body language if they've broken a major rule. It's like, oh shit. What have I done? We must take into account, it has been instilled within animals' DNA, that it is normal to relieve themselves any place or any time they get the urge without restrictions, but we train them to go against that normalcy. I've utilized the previous scenario to show that instincts work basically the same way within humans. Sexuality is a strong urge, naturally instilled within all of us. This is why I believe what happens in most cases of sexual harassment and abuse amongst humans, is this: the individual committing the act, knows instinctively what is happening and why it shouldn't be happening. But at that moment in time, logic is usually overridden by this powerful instinct. As in the case of our pets having an accident on the carpet, displaying that oh shit, what have I done look, the same reaction occurs when a human commits a sexual infraction against another human being. He suddenly remembers that he has been trained, that some emotions cannot be acted out any time they hit. I understand I might be ridiculed for comparing human instincts to animal instincts, but Instincts are merely a strong set of involuntary codes, embedded deeply within every living being, basically to ensure the survival of each individual species. In the same manner in which our pets control their instincts, by learning not to go on the carpet, we as humans, must control certain instincts, learning to apply them only in an appropriate context. Sexuality is so powerful that we can't deny it, but we also cannot allow it to destroy us by misusing or abusing it. However, no matter what the situation, no one should ever impose his will upon another human being, who is unwilling to engage in sexual relations. This seems to be happening all around us. When it comes to adults having intimate relations, by all means, there must always be mutual consent. There should always be a respect of boundaries between one another. No one should ever use power as a reason, or a means of harassing, overpowering, or controlling another human being, no matter what age or gender. I stated earlier, that race, age, gender and color doesn't exist in the spirit realm. That particular statement and that entire concept has to be viewed primarily from a spiritual metaphysical aspect. Simply because, if not viewed within that framework, for most of us, that statement has no relevancy whatsoever. I realize we do have to remain realistic, because we are existing in the physical realm, where race, age, gender, and color does exist, and they do matter. I'd like to clarify and expound on that concept by focusing on sexuality and the age factor in our society. This is a very delicate and sensitive matter. It should be handled as such. Sexual misconduct and abuse fits under a large blanket. If that scenario affected adults only, it might not seem quite as atrocious, but this situation is so vast, that it has crept into a very sacred place, affecting the purest form of innocence in society. The innocents I'm referring to are minors. In the case of minors, they should never be exposed to something this powerful. Some adults even have difficulties dealing with this tremendous energy. Under no circumstances imaginable, should an adult interact intimately with a minor. This is way beyond the scope of reason and understanding. When it comes to sexuality, we've got to understand and respect the age factor, because we are dealing with a level of pure innocence. Minors are at a stage in their lives, where they are not prepared or able to emotionally handle the responsibility of this powerful energy. Strict laws have been passed to curb such actions against minors. Adults should never cross that line. Not even with teens, who feel they are grown or mature enough to indulge in this action. It is apparent that teens have sexual feelings, as is revealed by the way they are having sex amongst each other in their own age group, but usually that's not punishable by law. If two teens around the same age are caught engaging in sexual relations, that situation is usually dealt with by the parents or an adult guardian. Even that particular scenario, if not handled properly, can turn out not so good, creating other issues such as teen pregnancies, STDs, and the emotional stress that comes along with responsibilities that children are not equipped to handle. I believe most adults might agree that 18 might be an acceptable age for some minors to at least entertain the thought of sexual relations, but even that age group depends on the maturity level of the individual. Again, not saying 18 is the ideal acceptable age for minors to engage sexually. In many cases at first sight, and from a distance, some teens look very much adult-like to the naked eye, but are still very naive and innocent, and just because they feel they are prepared to deal with sexual matters, doesn't mean they are emotionally ready for that situation. At that early stage of development, they still need more experience and education in many areas of their lives. I find it hard to believe that the conflicts and problems revealed in this writing are based around attacking this amazing power which was meticulously created and designed for sharing blissful and pleasurable feelings between individuals. We as humans are obviously denigrating this power by trying to sweep it under the rug. After all is said and done, and we've gone through all of the judgments, the punishments, and ridiculing of one another, and the beast appears to be tamed and tucked away out of view, just remember, it will always reveal itself in another fashion. Perhaps in a form that might be equal to, or worse than the sexual misconducts in which we are seeing currently. That is why we have to be careful in how we deal with this. Viewing it through spiritual lens, and putting it into its original and normal context is the only way we can understand it. It appears the sexual misconducts we are now experiencing is the result of corrupting a significantly natural power, and taking it totally out of context. Until we address this issue properly, we will continue to experience various actions in the form of sexual misconduct. I would like to say very vehemently, this writing is in no way a defense of sexual harassment, or sexual misconduct, but merely an attempt at trying to show why we as humans might be overlooking the underlying reasons these things are taking place. It seems we have a problem as a society, as opposed to this being an individual issue. We seem to have forgotten that nature has provided us with a magnificent gift, enabling us to share and enjoy each other's energy, while also laying out a perfect plan, and a perfect means of proliferating life as we know it. This gift is instilled within everyone, but everyone tend to experience it differently. It's an emotion designed to be shared, not forced upon someone else who is not in the sharing mode. There are many situations in life that we need to confront and deal with. Sexual misconduct happens to be one of them. I believe it has come to the forefront for a reason. That reason, I feel, is to give us the opportunity to face and confront it head on, enabling us to see its true nature. This is the part of the book where I attempt to reiterate everything I've talked about up until this point. I realize I do tend to over-expound on subjects I'm passionate about, but that is just to make sure the point is clear. I've presented, compared, and connected several different scenarios throughout this writing. My purpose for doing this is to show there is not just one factor contributing to the sexual misconducts we are experiencing, but there are many elements involved. As I mentioned a bit earlier, the original method for souls to share their energy was experienced through a process called merging, but after entering the physical realm as young souls, we tailored the concept to fit into the physical format. It then became known as sexual intercourse. This process was designed to serve three individual purposes in the physical realm. The first purpose was to create immense pleasurable feelings of euphoria. The second purpose was to enhance and accommodate another strong emotion we call love. While purpose number 3 was to keep the human race going. All of these components are wrapped up as one very powerful force. That is the power we are dealing with. We can't continue to suppress this incredible energy without facing further negative consequences. Now is the time to take the time to learn more about it, then learn to embrace and control it, so that it's no longer misused and misdirected. That is the only way we can bring about a change when dealing with a power of this magnitude. Once we understand it, not only will we protect ourselves, but we can also educate and protect our children from being harmed spiritually, physically, and psychologically. We must allow them to embrace, understand, then develop this gift at their own pace, while becoming mature adults, so that they can share it with another partner in a healthy, respectful, and productive manner for many years to come, the way in which it was designed to operate. In closing, I would like to say, we should never mislead anyone into believing this energy is destructive, dark, and ugly. It has become taboo, only because of the way it's viewed and misdirected in our society by so many misinformed individuals. Together we can heal this situation we call sexual misconduct, with just a little understanding and compassion for one another. Without going into detail, I think everyone is familiar with the parable pertaining to throwing stones if you live in a glass house syndrome. For many years we have scrutinized, criticized, and ostracized sexuality. Some people actually feel there is something nasty or ugly about sexuality in general. This is just another example of taking another one of nature's great creations out of context. I feel this is the root of the problems we are facing with sexual misconduct. We are all in this together. Sexuality, in and of itself, is not a bad thing. It's simply an energy that needs to express itself in the way in which it was designed to do. If we demonize it and mystify it, we will continue to experience guilt and confusion when dealing with it. It depends on how society chooses to deal with it as we move forward, that will make the difference. It's imperative that we learn to view everything in life from a spiritual perspective, before we can see a change in a particular area. Until we return to a full awakening, there is one thing we've got to remember, and that is, respect for one another is the bottom line, and that is just the beginning of the healing process, which is something we need so badly. Thanks for listening. Peace and love.